This week on the Powell Not Found Podcast, we're talking about The Naked Gun, and we're talking about Rob Manfred's hint at expansion and at realigning Major League Baseball as we know it. Here we go. Let's go.
I'm gonna tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast. Did she knew her birthday was getting corona?
Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 72 of the Powell Not Found Podcast for the week of August 18th, 2025. I am your host, Mark Powell, as I am every single week and the week after until the end of time. And if you like the show, go ahead and subscribe on our YouTube channel and find us wherever podcasts are served up. This week, we are talking about one of the better movie experiences I have had in a long time. There is a certain movie, came out August 15th. And I should get all the information for this movie up here because I don't want to shortchange any of the people involved in it. So let me get up the information. But this week, I went to go see The Naked Gun, which is the spiritual reboot, if you will. Maybe third sequel, I guess, to the 1988 cultural iconic movie, The Naked Gun, Files from the Police Squad, starring Leslie Nielsen and Priscilla Presley. And in 2025, Akiva Schaffer, the director, along with producers Seth MacFarlane, have brought back The Naked Gun for 2025. And let me tell you, it is amazing. There's so much about The Naked Gun that's cultural, that still lives on to this day. Working in video for as long as I have, I think every single time I mic up a person, every single time I get a person ready to go on stage or go film or do what have you, The Naked Gun is referenced for its leaving the mic on scene from the original movie. It is something that I had, weirdly, it had been a big blind spot in my film knowledge that I hadn't seen until this past weekend, what they're referencing, but I had actually seen certain jokes from the Naked Gun original movie repurposed in different things, mostly The Simpsons. I think I've seen Homer do the same joke in an episode of The Simpsons when he's addressing the town or something like that. I feel like a lot of people see movies through The Simpsons that they never actually saw the original ones because they were either too young to see or just didn't get around to. And The Naked Gun was certainly one of those for me. So when they decided to reboot it, at first I think I was skeptical of seeing this movie, how much of this was going to be a bust, how much of it was going to not live up to the original. And let me tell you, it absolutely shines brighter than you would ever imagine. I looked up this movie to go see it this weekend, and the first thing that jumped out at me was a short runtime. The movie only goes for 85 minutes, right? Which is nothing in today's standards. So many movies take up so much of your time. Looking at you, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Looking at you, The Irishman. Looking at you, Oppenheimer. I mean, there are moments in Oppenheimer where at some point you're like, Oppie, you just gotta make the bomb. Like, we gotta move on. I gotta go shopping tonight. I have to go watch the game. I've got to do things. I've got to do things of priority. So we can't take 3.5 hours to watch a movie anymore. There was one that was nominated for Best Picture. It was it Colin Hanks? Who was it? It was Colin Hanks, wasn't it? That was in a 3-hour and 30-minute runtime. It was the World War II movie that I can't remember the name of. Too much time. So 85 minutes, not even clocking in at an hour and a half, immediately hooked me. Means if you were in there at 2 o'clock, 2:30, you're out by 4, right? You still have a lot of the day to work with. And The Naked Gun uses every single minute of the runtime to pelt you with jokes. It is like watching a tight comedy set. It will make you realize that there's a missing genre in comedy, especially when it comes to movies, that has just not been tapped since it feels like maybe the late 80s, when these things were allowed to happen, when the box office was a little bit more laissez-faire about what came out. You don't see this type of movie in there. It is delightfully stupid. It is an escapist movie, if there's ever been one. And it just delights with how over the top it can get. It reminds me of doing a comedy sketch, right? Of just whenever you would work in comedy sketches, whether you were at Second City or whether you're at IO or whatever, when you were writing for sketches, there was kind of like an inherent goal that you were going to keep on going over the top, over the top, over the top, over the top. And you would almost one-up the premise every single time. That was kind of like the point of Harold, right? Like you would have established a scene, it would get a little bit bigger, and then by the end, it would coalesce into something bigger and bigger and bigger, right? This is what The Naked Gun does perfectly. It sets you up with ongoing jokes that keep on getting bigger, stupider, and they never let go. The rule of threes is completely out the window. It keeps on going and going and going. It sets you up for lunacy, and it sets you up right off the bat. You know, I think it was Seth Meyers that was basically saying that right off the bat, you know what kind of movie you're in for from the very, 3 scenes into the movie, because of how joyfully stupid everything is, and how they take certain movie tropes, different. There's references to The Godfather in here. There's references to Mission Impossible in here. There's references. There's incredible references, if you're watching the trailer here, to the original Naked Gun, all over the place, and it just keeps on going and going and going. It's a very superficial plot, right? But it doesn't need to be, because it doesn't need to be that deep, right? We know where it's going, but it's the joy of being in this absurdist world that is the most fun to be around. It really does the original film justice. I went back after watching this movie. I was intrigued. I was like, okay, how much of this movie do they pull from the original? This movie does a really good job of not being a one-to-one remake of the first one. It certainly puts you in a similar world as the first one, with the way that it's absurd, with the puns, but it modernizes the references of the world. It lets the cast shine in a different way. It's not the same thing. It's not a sequel, a direct sequel. It is kind of a reboot that honors the original material in a very, very, very fun way. This is probably the perfect movie to see if you're feeling stressed out in any way. This kind of movie, I think, will help you. There's too many comedies I feel like people go to and they don't realize what they're getting themselves into when they go, which always ends up, it's like going to a comedy show where you don't realize it's too dirty, it's too blue, and you end up being more embarrassed than actually satisfied with the value. Now, there are raunchy parts of this movie, which I think comes with like the territory of it being produced by Seth MacFarlane. I mean, I think that's, but it doesn't necessarily overstep any boundaries that wouldn't necessarily be around in a 1980s comedy. So it does a good job kind of, and even when it does get that kind of raunchy, it does kind of undercut itself by realizing that like this is not great to see. The characters themselves do a great job of realizing how awkward the situation is that you're watching. The references and the allusions are great. There is an extended scene in here that you don't even realize is a joke until it just starts building and building and building. And that's where I think the movie really got me, was that even in the moments, the quiet moments where you think, oh, this is going to turn into a serious kind of movie, they're making this a little bit more serious, you realize that you're in the eye of the hurricane, and it's going to come back at you with a joke that's funnier that you weren't even expecting. So they're even they pace it out so well that while they have jokes that will go over your head because they're so dryly delivered, they also have jokes that they're setting you up for, and they're waiting and waiting for the perfect spot for it to build and build and build. It is quite frankly, it's a great symphony when it comes to how they've arranged the pacing of these jokes, whether it's a joke that keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger, or it's a joke that just slowly builds over time and then just becomes hilarious. It is Liam Neeson, from the characters themselves. Liam Neeson does a great job of playing Frank Drebin Jr. in this movie. Frank Drebin Jr., Frank Drebin, who was Leslie Nielsen, apparently had a son, Liam Neeson, with an Irish accent, never commented on. And he is part of Police Squad. Police Squad is going through some tumultuous times, and he's trying to get it back on track without it being shut down by the town. Pamela Anderson, who it's been a minute, I guess, since she has been in something as big as this, plays Liam Neeson's opposite and does a great job being that facsimile character of Priscilla Presley from the first one, his love interest, right? It's not only as crazy and wacky as the original one was, but it is, she does a good job playing that comic relief, which I think is the more surprising aspect of that, because I don't think that a lot of people associated Pamela Anderson with comedy, but she does a great job being that secondary lead against Liam Neeson, and together they just create such a wacky chemistry on screen. And it's good to see them stretching, like, I don't think if in 1,000 years, if someone was to approach me and say, oh, there's going to be a Naked Gun reboot, who would you cast? I don't know if I would ever get to Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson. That wouldn't even cross my mind, but it's cast very, very well. And everybody plays it so straight that it's just a joy. And then it's over before you know it. And there's so much that is compact into this 85 minutes and weaved together in such a beautiful way that it feels like you're watching a superhero movie because it culminates that way. But it just keeps building and building and building. And then it has a great climax at the end, and it just keeps you laughing from start to finish. And there are not a lot of movies I can count on my hand that I remember people howling at. And this was not that packed of a movie theater, and people were laughing really, really loudly. And it says something about the state of the movie industry that there hasn't been something like this in a long time. It's been about 30 plus years since the last one, 3.5. It was like 1993, I think it was out. that you can't point to a good comedy that is short, sweet, and doesn't overstay its welcome. And that's the best things I can say about this movie, is that it's just like watching a tight comedy set. Like Jim Gaffigan's or Seinfeld or Nate Bargatze, where it's like you keep laughing and it's just punctuated. And you're getting boxed and pelted with jokes each time. That's what this feels like. Whatever you do, don't plan your bathroom breaks. If you go to the movie theater, plan your bathroom breaks accordingly, because you don't want to miss anything, because so much can be packed into this movie that you don't want to miss any of the jokes. It actually made me want to go back to see it again, and that's not a feeling I have a lot when it comes to movies. I feel like once I see them, I'll see them again, maybe if they come on TV. But I wanted to go back because there's so much happening in the details, even things happening in the background, that you want to know what you missed. It was like watching a comedy I Spy, if you will, where there is so many things that can be happening in this tapestry because it's so dense. That, figuratively, it's also dense too, but it's just dense and packed with detail. And I think that's what made me very excited to actually watch this movie and see this movie. So that is The Naked Gun. The Naked Gun had come out in August 15th, I believe was the debut. In theaters in August 1st. Naked Gun, and that's Liam Neeson as Lieutenant Frank Drebin Jr., and directed by Akiva Schaffer, who also did Pop Star Never Stop Stoppin', which I remember even at the time. I remember that movie. That was the movie with Andy Samberg. That movie was also crazy and ridiculous at the time too. So it very much follows the same vein as that movie as well. So again, that's The Naked Gun, starring Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson, out August 1st. Go see it in theaters. You won't regret it. It does have a little bit of a raunchy part here and there and stuff like that, but it's worth it. It's not going to embarrass anybody, blah, blah, blah. So go see this movie. Very good movie. We'll be right back. We're going to talk a little bit about the MLB expansion when we come back from the break. Hey, everybody, and welcome back again to the Powell Not Found Podcast. This is episode 72. We are on youtube.com at Powell Not Found. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel there. Also, find us wherever you find podcasts. So, Apple Podcast. What's the other one? I can't remember. Wherever you find podcasts, you can probably find it. So, go ahead and rate and review the show there. And we are coming back here, coming off a fairly steamed episode last week where I was talking about the New York Yankees and their struggles. Now, struggles and steamy takes and angry takes and hot takes and whatever take you want. Anyway, you sowed it last week. The Yankees were not playing well. They were not hitting. They were not pitching. They were not playing with any kind of urgency. They were defensively making mistakes. And then they go into St. Louis, a team that is struggling in its own right, and they go in and they sweep the Cardinals in 3 games, and they put themselves squarely kind of back into divisional play, only being 5.5 back of the Toronto Blue Jays as we speak, and gaining a 3.5 game lead on the wild card, I believe. Let me see what that wild card looks like right now. Yeah, the Yankees are 3.5 up on the Cleveland Guardians. So a key time to start winning. Yankees are 67 and 57. They put themselves 10 games above 500 for the year. So still, still in a playoff spot, which is what tends to matter in today's baseball landscape. The Toronto Blue Jays sit on top of the division at 73 and 52, followed by the Boston Red Sox at 68 and 57. Only one game up on the win column for the Yankees, and they are tied in the loss column at 57 apiece. And who would have thought, right, that the Red Sox would be even in the conversation earlier in the year when they were struggling mightily? But that goes to show you just how far it can swing. And it's been happening all over the league. I mean, the Astros are only a game and a half above the Seattle Mariners. The Dodgers, they finally completed a sweep of the San Diego Padres, only have a 2-game lead. They were up like 9 games, 10, whatever it was, 8 games, 9 games in the division. The Milwaukee Brewers, I think, they lost yesterday for the first time in 14 games. So they are 9 games up on the Chicago Cubs. Who would have thought that the best record in the major leagues would belong to the Brewers of all people? So sitting at 79 and 45. And the reason I bring this up is because as coming off of the Astros series, the Yankees were in a dire state, right? They needed some some kick in the pants, right? And then Brian Cashman kind of came to St. Louis, and he kind of started talking about how the team was playing and how they kind of needed to win. There's an Athletic article out by Kirshner and Ken Rosenthal, which came out August 15th of 2025. And Cashman started kind of talking about how defending Aaron Boone, the headline is Brian Cashman defends Boone. You got to understand what the atmosphere is like. And he said, quote, "One thing that people may really forget is that we play in a market that holds you, maybe Boston and Philly too, that holds you more accountable automatically. Quote, the market already provides instant accountability. In many cases, today's world is just so much more different than generations before. I think leaders, managers, coaches are more inclined to try to support and help players that are going through a lot as they try to navigate their struggles. Struggles are part of the game. It's just louder in a bigger market." Then he goes on to say, quote, "I'm not an advocate of becoming Randy Macho Man Savage or John Cena from WWE," very specific reference, "and providing a power drive to finish off the victim. The victim being someone struggling at the plate, struggling defensively, struggling on the mound. And now you're hearing it externally, and their family and friends are all hearing it. Then internally, now they're getting piled on also. In many cases, you've got to understand what the atmosphere is like." And then he goes on to kind of talk about how, Boone's atmosphere and Boone's the atmosphere he's developing in the clubhouse, and also Boone's way of taking this criticism and how he's handling it. He goes, quote, "I don't know how any manager, let alone a manager in a big market like New York," speaking of Aaron Boone, "I've told him many times how he does the pre and post game and navigates that on a daily basis. That's not easy. It takes a talent in its own right to try to walk through that without losing your cool or getting emotional. He has stayed level-headed and even-keeled. He knows how tough the sport is. He's invested in these guys heavily, as we all are. Trying to explain away a difficult play or a bad performance for some time while the storm is upon us is not an easy task to navigate or deal with, and remain cool, calm, and collected. He's obviously done an amazing job of working through that." I think this is something that basically a GM comes to say when the media starts getting loud. I don't necessarily agree that it wasn't like this in generations before. We talked about it last week in Boston before they won the World Series. The media was loud. It might have been 1 or 2 radio stations, but the landscape and the people yelling at talk radio was everywhere. And it was not coming down. When Boston got booted from the ALCS in 2003 by Aaron Boone himself, the noise was loud. I think this is Cashman quelling the storm a little bit. Now, I think it helps that he says this and they come in and they sweep the Cardinals. To be fair, the Cardinals were not exactly doing that great at 61-61 before they entered play in this series. They ended up at 61-64. They are 18.5 games out. The Yankees did exactly what they needed to do against the Cardinals. What's really going to convince the fan base and what's going to convince Yankee fans is in this next 40-game stretch as we head towards the home stretch is, can the Yankees play good baseball against, wait for it, good teams? They have a 2-game series against the Tampa Bay Rays, who are sitting at 61-64, the identical record the Cardinals are at now. They need to take both games. Then they face 4 games against the Red Sox, which are going to be critical. This will be the end of the season if they lose 3 out of 4, if they get swept. We're not coming back from that. Say if everything stays the same as it is right now, and the Yankees take 4 games against Boston, at least you're in striking distance, right, within each other. You're putting one away, and you have to be focused on Boston right now. You can't be focused on Toronto because you have 6 games to play against Toronto anyways, but you don't want to cut it that close. Remember, they have the tiebreaker. If the Yankees and the Jays are tied at the end of the year, it goes to the Toronto Blue Jays. So, because they've already won the season series because they've dropped so many games. So this will be critical. Tampa Bay Rays, this 2-game series, and I don't know why they've scheduled it like this, but this 2-game series will be a warm-up for what will become one of the more critical series coming up against the Red Sox later in the week. So this could be a great showing for the Yankees, but if they lose that first game, man, the season's not going to look great. It's just not going to look great. And I don't think any Yankee fan is necessarily going to be comfortable going in at the 3rd wild card spot. And talking about wild card spots, let's move on to some interesting sound here that has kind of generated a little bit of noise from the Sunday night game? The Sunday night game, the Mets and the Mariners. A lot of stuff is going to happen to baseball in the next 2 years. And a lot of stuff is going to happen to baseball until Rob Manfred retires in 2029. I think he kind of gave everybody a 5-year notice in 2024 that he was going to finish out the last 5 years of his contract. And then he was going to pass the baton. And there's been many things that Rob Manfred has done for the sport of baseball that have been positive and good. We've talked about them many times on this podcast. The pitch clock, making the bases bigger, improving the run game, banning the shift, things that needed to happen. Automated balls and strikes are coming very, very soon, if not next year. I don't know if they actually did. Did they balls and strikes? Did they confirm that? Yeah, likely. They could. Yeah, I thought for a second they actually confirmed that it's coming in 2026, but I think right now everyone's saying it's likely that automated balls and strikes are coming. We saw a little bit of an element of automated balls and strikes in the All-Star game, and it was interesting, quick. It does it's jarring, I think, to see in the first place. I'm not sure if I actually tend to agree with it as of right now, but it's still something that's coming. Something that was used in spring training heavily. So he's done a lot of different things to baseball that have impacted the game in a positive way. So it was striking to hear Rob Manfred say this when Sunday Night Baseball came, and he started talking about things that people knew were coming down the pike, but maybe didn't know he was talking about it too publicly. Let's take a listen.
And it provides us with an opportunity to geographically realign. I think we could save a lot of wear and tear on our players in terms of travel. And I think our postseason format would be even more appealing for, entities like ESPN, because you'd be playing up out of the East, out of the West, and that 10 o'clock time slot where we, sometimes get Boston, Anaheim, would be two West Coast teams, and that 10 o'clock slot that's a problem for us sometimes becomes a real opportunity for our West Coast audience. So I think, I think the owners realize that there's demand for Major League Baseball in a lot of great cities, and that we have an opportunity to do something good around that expansion process.
So a lot of stuff to unpack there, right? So geographically, he said a couple of things. One, expansion, right? Can come to we have a lot of people interested in Major League Baseball. We know that there's been a lot of cities floated around expansion for the last couple of years, Nashville being probably like the top one. We've seen Oakland move to Vegas and Sacramento. Salt Lake City is being thrown around as another candidate for a potential another West team to kind of break away the little stranglehold that Colorado has here. And we've seen quite a bit of shakeup just in general in the last 20 years, right? I mean, we've seen Montreal move to Washington with great success. We've also seen Montreal come up as a place, a temporary place for the Rays when it seemed like Tampa was not going to be a factor soon. They were talking about even as late as last year, Tampa Bay playing half of its games in Montreal and trying to introduce baseball back into a place where baseball was kind of successful. There were some people in the seats. It wasn't completely empty. It was the last game was very, very full. The others, And then you heard them talk about geographically changing the divisions to be more geographically oriented, which would be a huge, huge shakeup. It would be more hockey-like, where the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference and the divisions are more kind of based around where you are to ease up travel on the players and maybe ease up the fact that some teams, at 7 o'clock are opening up games at 10 o'clock and hurting the ratings. This would be really interesting to try to implement. This would be very weird to see the Red Sox, the Mets, the Phillies, these huge market teams in the same division, which is probably one of the reasons you wouldn't want to do that. Now, hypothetically, if everyone was geographically put in the same division, and I've seen some people say that it would be four divisions, excuse me, of 8 teams apiece, because you got to assume that it would there would be 2 expansion teams, because there's historically been, when they do expand, it's usually 2. I think the last expansion that we've had was the Tampa Bay Devil Rays and the Arizona Diamondbacks in 1998. So it has been quite some time since a new team has entered the league that hasn't moved. And I say that because the exception is the Washington Nationals and the Montreal Expos. But just think about that, right? Think about how many big markets may be boxed out because a lot of them are clumped together geographically. So Boston, New York, the Yankees, Mets. So Red Sox. Sorry, let me start again. Red Sox, New York, the Mets. I can't even say it. The Red Sox, the Mets, the Yankees, the Phillies, Baltimore, Washington. That's 6. I'm trying to think. Did I miss anybody? Going down. Nothing in Virginia. The Braves. That's 7. Right? Is that and the Tampa Bay Rays and the Marlins, right? That's your 9 or 8, 9. Right? That's your Eastern Division. Like, think about the mammoth possibility of boxing out the Red Sox, the Phillies, or the Mets or the Yankees, because there's a glut of teams. Now, a lot of people say that that's what happens with divisions in general, but the more and more this playoff structure expands, the more and more divisions don't seem to make a lot of sense anymore. And I only say that looking at like something like the AL Central, right? I mean, the Detroit is incredible this year, but historically the AL Central has been a weaker division. Teams skating by, getting a divisional title with 87, 88 wins. Something that's not necessarily competitive. That has been the story of that division. There are a lot of times in the division, in the playoffs in years past, where there are teams with greater records that get booted from the playoffs. There was that one year, I cannot remember the specific year, but it was 2021 or 2022 when the Dodgers, the Giants, and the Padres all had like high 90s, over 100 win seasons. It was unbelievable. And one of them, I believe it was the Giants, got booted from the playoffs. Yet somebody else from the NL Central got in, right? So if you are going to geographically align and you're going to take the top, the 12 teams to make the playoffs, top 6, then yeah, maybe it does make sense to geographically more realign it to what it used to be in a AL East and AL West and no central division. For those of you who are in NL East and an NL West, going back to a great old age when the Atlanta Braves were sitting in the NL West for some reason. Somebody riddle me that. But if that's what they're talking about, kind of geographically assigning divisions, then you could talk about maybe a radically different playoff picture. A lot of people have been talking about the fact that if they do this, this gives them the opportunity to expand the playoff picture. And I would also argue that that might not be a good idea. Right now, with 12 teams going into the postseason, and I hate to say it, right? But the Yankees are sitting at 10 games above 500. And they are clinging onto a third wild card spot. The next team behind them is the Guardians, and they are sitting at a 7 games, 6 games above 500. They're not a good team, right? You're diluting the value of the team in the playoffs. And you're allowing a lot of these teams that could get hot at the right time the opportunity to get a title, which is, fair game, I guess, if you punch a ticket. But then you have to ask yourself, are you truly seeing the best teams that you can possibly see? And I don't know if expanding the playoffs and changing the divisions, if they're necessarily going to see the best of the best teams make the playoffs each year. They talked a little bit about timing, about how the 7:00 games and the West Coast games would not be the case. It would kind of create, it would promote regional rivalries all over the place. I think baseball kind of has enough of that. What I wouldn't want to see come out of this is a shift back to the unbalanced schedule. For the last couple years, baseball has been kind of experimenting with everybody plays everybody. And if you weren't watching baseball for the last 3 years or so since it's been implemented, baseball used to be, a long time ago, the AL played the AL and the NL played the NL. This was years ago. Way before divisional play, all that kind of stuff. And there was no interleague play, which had its own benefits, because when an NL team and an AL team met in the World Series, it meant something. It was different. With everybody playing everybody now, and with the introduction of interleague play in 98, 96, 98. I remember when I was a kid, it happened in June. It would always be a novelty because you'd see teams that you'd never see before. It becomes less and less of a thing to see a National League and American League team play all the time when everybody plays everybody. And it really lessens the distinction between the leagues, the National League and the American League. When everybody plays everybody, you're just playing baseball at that point. No one's saying, oh, the American League is better, the National League is better. You know, it's a better quality of baseball. There's no differences anymore. One of the big differences of the National League was taken away a couple years ago, in which the pitcher would hit, right? Double switches, all these different baseball terms that have been taken away as the leagues have started to look the same. So, a few years back, there used to be an imbalanced schedule, which meant that divisional rivals, people within division, within the AL East, the AL Central, AL West, NL East, NL Central, NL West, they played their divisional teams way more than they played people outside their leagues. And there was a smattering of interleague play, usually in June, July, or whatever. They played each other 19 times, each divisional rival, which meant that if you were a Yankees fan, you saw the Red Sox, the Jays, the Orioles, and the Rays 19 times apiece, which meant an exorbitant amount of time watching the same teams over and over and over again. You have no idea how many Yankees, Jays, Yankees, Rays games I have watched in my lifetime. So a couple years ago, when the balanced schedule came out, I was jumping for joy because finally I could see and be exposed to teams that I would not see all the time. And that was amazing. So thought of them geographically realigning the divisions is not something that would appeal to me. I've seen too much of it in the imbalanced schedule already. Let us still enjoy playing the AL or the NL West, the AL Central or the NL Central. These are how you get to know the teams as a fan. If you keep playing the same teams, it just gets boring. It just gets boring. And that's how I feel about it. 2 extra teams, going to a 32-team league, you know, with everything in flux in Major League Baseball, I feel like the priority right now should not be expansion. Because if you think about it, if you take a step back, you have 2 teams playing in minor league parks. Right now, the Sacramento, yes, Vegas broke land on a stadium, but let's see if the stadium gets built, right? It's 3 years away. Right now, you have the A's playing in Sacramento. It's a minor league park. And you also have the Rays playing in a 1-year lease that's going to end this year in Steinbrenner Field, going back to the Thunderdome or Tropicana Field, in a field which is notorious for bad baseball play, right? You have a looming strike, labor negotiation, which is funny because it does. The whole thing about him talking about this publicly seems like, again, Rob Manfred is kind of like publicly campaigning the things that he wants to do over and over and over again. Wasn't it just a couple weeks ago that he was in a Phillies locker room and Bryce Harper told him to get the F out of here because he was talking about a salary cap? I mean, there is an impending strike that's going to happen at the end of the 2026 season, and we might not get 2027 baseball. So the idea of expanding seems far-fetched at this point and seems a little bit like putting the cart before the horse. So let's try to get that figured out first before we start messing with a formula that is okay. Less travel for the players, frankly, is something that I don't care about as a fan. That's all they do. So, if they're driving to each park, I get it, right? If you had to drive from Yankee Stadium to Chase Field, I get it. But to be honest, it's not something that is going to necessarily resonate with a lot of fans who are stuck going over the George Washington Bridge during congestion pricing, that anyone is going to feel bad for the luxury planes that the teams ride and the travel getting to the players. So with that, we'll go ahead and close out the show. Again, this is the Powell Not Found Podcast. We're coming to you every single week with sports, movies, and news. This week we came to you with the Naked Gun movie that came out and talked about a little bit of the Yankees sweep of the Cardinals and some expansion in the MLB. Next week we'll be back with more movie news, TV news, anything that I want to talk about here on the Powell Not Found Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.